The World Series it will officially end this week at some point, which means the last week of Major League Baseball for 2023, which means the Guardians should have a manager by the end of the week, and we'll have 40-man roster decisions to debate. Could we be any more excited to do that? And we will be there for you, like we've always been there. This is Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Guardians. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever you get a podcast. And remember that we have your team covered every day. And it may seem like, every day is a lot, but we are there this postseason, as Justin just stated. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit fanduel.com/lockdown to get started. Let's get started with this show. Should we start with manager chatter?
Sure. We can start with manager Tanner. I can't even talk. We'll
more Tanners. Do we have any Tanners on the manager?
We have some Tanners. We have a Tanner to talk about. For sure. What new friends are we going to get in the dugout this year for the Cleveland Guardians? Craig Counsell set to interview this week with the Guardians. We'll see how that turns out. They at least got permission, and he's going to interview. I think most people seem to think that they're going to name a manager within the week here, and we'll see how long it takes to get there. But Counsell at least is in the running now, or at least they have a shot to talk to him and see where that goes. I saw a couple articles over the weekend talking about Terry Francona was paid, I think,
the highest paid manager
million
in baseball.
Yeah, 4.5. I saw an article disputing that. I think Dave Roberts was potentially paid more, but either way, at $4.5 million.
What was it? Bob Nightingale, and then was confirmed by Terry Pluto. Confirmed it. I think I saw, and someone else confirmed it, so that he was the highest paid.
Well, either way, he's paid. Yeah, paid very well. We'll see if they can pay Craig Counsell more than what the Mets want, or maybe they don't want to go in that direction, but. Here's the candidates we know at this point. We know Craig Counsell's interviewing.
Real quickly interrupt you. Just want to make one point on that before I lose it. And I lost it, so never mind. You go, and I'll see if I can gain it back. I knew it was there, and then it slipped away.
That was a worthwhile interruption. Thank you. Craig Counsell interviewing this week, and then we know Craig Albernaz has interviewed. We know Carlos Mendoza has interviewed. We know that John McDonald has interviewed, Chris Faleka, Clayton McCullough, Stephen Vogt, and Andy Green. So those are the candidates. Right now, I think it's definitely any of these guys. Counsell, McCullough, and Vogt. I think that's the three. Maybe Green. I think Green's in the fourth.
Yeah,
I can see the fourth. Those are the four to me.
And then I finally remember my point. If you were curious, wait, his contract is up. Why do they have to get permission to interview him? Why is this taking a little while? It's not up till the season's over. So that's why that particular situation is occurring. I had someone ask me, why do they have to ask permission? It's like, well, that's why. Technically, he's still under contract.
Yeah, the fact they're letting him do that, I mean, I don't know. I'm not really sure why, because I think Milwaukee definitely wants to retain him, and I would too if I was Milwaukee. But
unless they don't want to pay him. He's another high-paid one.
Yeah, I don't know what direction they want to go in next year. I mean, it definitely seems like Milwaukee still would like to have him back. I don't know. I mean, if Cleveland is willing to pay him anywhere near what they were willing to pay Terry Francona, and then if David Stearns is dead set on reuniting with Craig Counsell in New York, I don't think it'll be hard to convince Steve Cohen. I mean, Steve Cohen went out of his way to make sure that he was going to get David Stearns. I mean, David Stearns stepped down from as the GM of the Brewers to become a consultant so he can get the soft out in his contract to bide his time until he could officially go work for the Mets, because that was who Steve Cohen wanted all along. And I don't think Steve Cohen is putting any price that's too much to hire a manager if David Stearns tells him Craig Counsell's the guy we absolutely want, then I'm sure there won't be any fight about it. But we don't know if Counsell's chasing money. Like you've mentioned before, his son is playing high school ball in Milwaukee or in
he
Wisconsin.
Graduated. He
did graduate.
Yes, he's a freshman in Michigan. Both of his sons have moved on. Again, I just can't help but feel like all of this talk about, hey, Cleveland pays managers a ton. Like the talk isn't always
stalking horse.
Yeah, it's not about if this is a good fit. All these articles are about, hey, Cleveland will pay a manager. This feels like a manager pushing to make sure that, like, if Counsell goes to New York, he is the highest paid manager in the game by a significant margin. That's what this strikes me as more than anything else.
You know what's funny about that? Not that we haven't said that the Cleveland shouldn't spend more on their payroll, manager salaries. I don't necessarily know how they reflect that, but we get a lot of comments saying, well, and I've seen a lot of comments saying, well, they'll just if they hire McCullough, if they hire Vogt, who would be his second job in the majors on the bench somewhere, oh, we'll just hire whoever's cheap. Not really, because they paid Terry Francona $4.5 million, so suggests they're willing to pay for someone they feel is worth it. So I would guess they'd be willing if they really feel Craig Counsell is the guy they want to bring into the organization. Then I'm sure they'll pay him whatever they can. I don't know if they'll pay him as much. I don't know if they'll make him the highest paid manager in baseball like Terry Francona was, but I don't think money is necessarily going to be an issue. But there is a point where, again, like I said, if the Mets decide, if David Stearns goes to Steve Cohen and says this is our guy, then Cohen's not going to let money stand in the way either. But like I said, we don't know if Counsell is chasing the money. There's only so much money you can. I mean, at some point, it's five. I mean, I know, for the rest of us who don't make this kind of money, it is consequential. But for guys who like Craig Counsell, money will be inconsequential because $5 million. Let's just put funny money on it. $5 million from the Guardians, $7 million from New York. There's taxes. There's comfort. There's the pressure of New York. There's
Can we also state too that, like, I know I can already see our comments. Sorry, my psychic is my psychic premonitions are just filling my head. Guess what? Even if you got a cheaper manager, it's probably going to still be over $1 million. So it's like, it's not, save that $3 million and spend it out. What does $3 million get you? It doesn't get you anything. So
on a player, nothing.
Like that's the general upgrade on that is not much. So
it's a backup catcher.
Yeah, if that. That's why I just wanted to jump in there and be like, stop your typing. That's not a way. And that's not the route to savings.
It's not. Neither is letting go of 20 front office workers either, who make a combined $1.5 million that you're not going to spend on a reliever even. And, you could save all that money.
Though if you did fire those 20 staffers and cheap out on the manager, maybe you're 80% of the way to Ronaldo Lopez.
So ask
not
yourself,
to a hitter, but to
Ronaldo Lopez. That's what you get, which we both want Ronaldo Lopez back, I think, but I don't think you're
going to have. I mean, that just is as a reliever. The impact between paying a reliever and having a solid manager is definitely. I bet the manager's going to have more impact. So just throw that out there as well.
Especially a free agent reliever at that, when you don't know where things are going for the rest of the year, because free agent relief help is always a very volatile game. Anyway, not the point we're trying to make. The other thing I'm kind of curious about too is we haven't talked about this yet. Which coaches we'd like to see come back next year. And we've mentioned, like, it's probably more likely that if they hire someone like Vogt or Green or McCullough, that they'd be open to retaining some continuity on the staff, depending on who that is, Alomar or Willis or whatever. But if it's Craig Counsell, you're probably going and saying, hire whoever you want, you do your thing. Like, Sandy Alomar either is or isn't the first base coach, but he'll be doing something else if he's not. So, and that's part of why they interviewed John McDonald. That's part of why they interviewed Mendoza and Albarnez, to see whether or not they are interested in them as part of the coaching staff.
And before we go to break, I just want to throw one thing in quickly. One of these things I always like to do is go and look at how fan bases react to, or the importance of coaches, like how they are viewed in lights. Like if you were a Padres fan, you had to feel great when Ruben Niebla got hired away because we were all complaining. Going through, a lot of these coaches don't inspire a ton, but the one guy that a fan base really is afraid to lose is McCullough. So that kind of moved him up on my list a little. He might be my number one candidate right now. And it's also looking at what players give him credit for improving them as hitters, as fielders, and transitioning, base running, moving to new roles. Like, he gets credit across the board. So I'm just going through and throwing that small bit. I think that's something interesting to always look at.
I also saw a quote that said Mookie Betts had said that Clayton McCullough was his favorite manager as well. So if the Guardians hire Clayton McCullough,
they're getting Mookie Betts.
You heard it here first. We'll see if FanDuel will put any odds on that. I don't know if FanDuel will have any odds on that, but right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Score early access this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. Wide range of betting options, spreads on games, player props, over-unders, more. Hopefully you definitely took the over on Browns Seahawks. I think that's what that ended up being. I watched some of the game, but I couldn't tell you the over-under. I think it was it was the under. It was for sure the over. Anyway, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Only so many more times we get to tell you this, but SiriusXM has all the World Series action up until possibly Saturday is Game 7. No matter how many games it goes, you can get all the action by listening to the World Series on your SiriusXM app. I listened to some of it Friday night. It was very easy to find on my app, I have to say. So you should continue to listen to the action. It's going to be an interesting series. It's already been a very compelling series. For all the people who kept saying, this is the series nobody wants, and this is boring, and nobody knows who the Diamondbacks really have outside of maybe Corbin Carroll. It's been a good series so far, I will say that. And the Diamondbacks are essentially doing what the Cleveland tried to do last year, although
they are. I mean,
they didn't have Corbin Carroll.
Yeah, but I mean, they had Jose Ramirez, right? And that's
enough. Yeah,
just going through this postseason. I mean, Merrill Kelly there's a fantastic story over on The Athletic about him, and former Guardians draft pick, a guy who went undrafted in the Rule 5, and that's why I went to Korea. Probably the most successful pitcher we've seen come across the ocean in the last 5 years.
I wasn't sure you were going with that. I was going to say Johan Santana was in, but you're right. He didn't go across the ocean.
No. Well, I mean, nobody took him. He was completely every team passed him over in the Rule 5 draft.
What about Miles Michaelis?
Oh, that's a good call as well. I mean, Merrill Kelly these past 2 years has been really, really good. He has been one of the most underrated pitchers.
Michaelis had a good run for a little bit.
He did, and he had a really strong year this year. But I think I'd still take Merrill Kelly, is all I'm saying. But
fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, they don't even have Cleveland's pitching at the start, and
they really don't.
You give them credit.
They have a couple relievers too. That's about it.
Yeah, it's a weaker pen, and that they went out and made that trade for Moreno. They gave up Dalton Varsho, who a lot of people, I probably even myself probably go back and hear me. And it took Moreno a while to get started, and they gave him that opportunity. And I think he had the only home run for them in the game yesterday. It's a fun team. I won't spend too much time, but yeah, it's a fun team going on there.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned Rule 5 debates, as soon as the World Series is over, everyone will start having these kind of discussions. We'll have more of them too, but we'll start today. The Rule 5 draft is December 6th, which if you know me or if you know Jeff, I think we both love the Rule 5 draft. It's a lot of fun. And the 40-man deadline is November 14th, which teams will start thinking about immediately as the World Series is over, because you've got options and non-tender deadlines all coming to a head. I've got an article dropping tomorrow talking about all the Rule 5 stuff. You can check that out. So real quick rundown. There's a bunch of guys who are eligible for the first time, and one of those guys is obviously Tanner
Burns.
Tanner Burns. Also, we probably should recap real quickly that Cleveland's roster right now is at 38. They do need to. Well, I'm sorry. Right now it's technically at 40. Cole Calhoun, Lucas Giolito, and Ronaldo Lopez will come off the 40. That will get them down to 38. They will have to re-add Tanner Bybee from the 60-day injured list because there's no injured list in the offseason. That'll put him back at 39.
Wait,
no, I'm sorry.
They're
at 40 now. They'll get rid of 3 players. I'm sorry, Cole Calhoun. So they'll be at 37. They'll get back to 38 with Bybee.
Yes.
I think common sense would tell you. I hope that Cam Gallagher is non-tender.
Isn't gonna, because he would make over $1 million if they tender him.
Oh, okay. So that would get you to 37, which gives you 3 spots to add. Daniel Espino. I don't know how much time we need to really spend on this. Like Daniel Espino is being added, even though he won't pitch again until like May at the earliest.
I thought he was done for forever.
Yes, of course. He's
you just might as well give up on him. That's what I saw so much of when he got hurt.
Yeah, it's over. Cleveland can't develop. The pitching pipeline is dead. Yeah. And they're not going to let somebody else put Daniel Espino on the IL for several months.
And then move into their bullpen and him turn into
take advantage. Yeah.
There's a world where he becomes the best reliever in baseball. Like that is within the realm of possibility.
As soon as this year possible, 2024 even. So that's a no doubter. There's a bunch of other relievers on the list. Like there's guys you can think about in terms of, we've talked about in the past, like Nick Enright's going to be Rule 5 eligible again because he came back last year. You have Mason Hickman, Nick Nikolachek. All those guys
Tanner Burns.
Yeah, Tanner Burns, who is, I don't know if he's a reliever now permanently, but he finished the year in the bullpen last year. Yeah. But he's not being protected. They're not protecting Tanner Burns, even though he's a former first-round pick. That might get him selected in the Rule 5 draft, maybe. That is something to think about, but I don't see. Cleveland doesn't have the room to protect him. They don't.
And okay, so the one guy, they lost Nick Enright last year, and he might have stuck if not for cancer. Like, let's just put that out there. This whole year for him was lost due to his cancer diagnosis and trying to get back from that. It was an amazing year on any level because he beat cancer and came back, so all the props to him. I don't think he comes back if that doesn't happen. The other guy, Kevin Kelly, had a weird, he's a different pitcher. And I think they had a hard time quantifying his breakout. Like he had big spin data and some other stuff. But he's one of those guys they probably lost just because there was no 2020 season. For the most part, I don't know how much you want to take the guys who are failing to develop in Cleveland, like a Tanner Burns, because do you really feel more comfortable with that guy who was a first rounder finding another level outside of Cleveland? Doesn't their pitching pipeline kind of play in their favor with the Rule 5 in a weird way?
It does, but I mean, anybody who had interest in Tanner Burns back then and thinks that they can take advantage. If you need pitching, if you think that this is a guy who had a lot of arm talent in college and we need someone like that here, I mean, I would take him. I would definitely do that, but everybody else has scouts. Everybody else has data. The one thing I will say too, I don't know how much they, you can find on your own from just bringing anything to the stadium, but I believe Cleveland is one of the teams that doesn't share data. Like
they don't.
Remember in 2020 there was that whole agreement to share data or not. And if you didn't share data,
they opted out.
You couldn't get data from other teams. They opted out, and I'm pretty sure they're not one of the teams that shares data with other teams either. So their data is so proprietary. So all the teams have is there are radar guns out there now, and other people bring their own Rapsodos to ballparks and TrackMan, whatever that is, Hawkeye. So because I see this all the time in Lake County when I cover games in Lake County, teams with opposing scouts there, the radar guns either have spin rates on them now or they have data. So they have a tracker set up in the ballpark, whether it's their own Rapsodo or their own Hawkeye or TrackMan, whatever they're using. So they can collect their own data that way. It's a little harder to do with batted ball data, obviously, because that takes a lot more. But they have spin rate data on Tanner Burns, and I'm sure it's not good. Because the Cleveland moved him to the bullpen for a reason. Other teams have scouts. They can see what it looked like too, and I don't know unless they clearly see something they can fix. Because look, this was a guy who was throwing 95, 96 at Auburn, and he has
never
not come close to that.
Maintain it. Yeah, but that was the thing. Like he had arm issues. He could never maintain it. It was not. It is what it is. I say, we have so many players to potentially talk about. Do we just want
another
to
reliever?
Take our break and come back and talk about the reliever you and I both think is a must add?
I don't know if I say must add, but I do think they will add.
Pretty close to a must add, right? If
We'll
you don't take him, he's probably gone.
We'll find out. Before we do that, make sure you are listening to Game 3 of the World Series on your SiriusXM app. That'll be tonight. They are in Arizona. I think I saw Randy Johnson is throwing out a first pitch. Luis Gonzalez is throwing out a first pitch. And it's somebody else. I can't remember who the other person was doing something for somebody in Arizona, lore of sorts. Hopefully Randy Johnson doesn't hit a bird with his first pitch. But speaking
and Will Brennan should be in a club. They should form the.
That's true. They could start their own club. Speaking of which, I did see some interesting costumes circulate on social media over the weekend for Halloween. There was somebody who went as Randy Johnson and the bird that he killed. I don't know how many years. 2001 was the year it happened in spring training with the ball. So that was a very creative Halloween costume. Fitting that the Diamondbacks are back in the World Series. I would assume those people were probably Diamondbacks fans. Anyway, so the reliever we were talking about before was Cade Smith, who was a 2020 undrafted free agent who probably would have been drafted in a normal draft.
He's 5 rounds that year.
Yeah, he pitched at Hawaii, is from Canada, pitched for Team Canada WBC this past year. A lot of interesting data. Guy who gets up to 98, has a splitter. He's a lot like Trevor Stephan, if you ask me. I think the splitter is newish for him. He's got a slider. He throws hard. He's got a kind of a funky arm angle.
It is interesting to compare him because you go back and look at that 2020 draft class with Tanner Burns, with Mason Hickman. And I thought Hickman was going to be the key to that draft, if I'm being honest, because he was the guy who was successful, that if they could unlock more, could be something. But he is more valuable than pretty much any pitcher not named Logan Allen they drafted that year, right?
I would say he's more valuable than anybody they drafted that year outside of Logan Allen.
Over Petey Halpin? Wasn't that the Halpin draft, or was Halpin the year before?
That was the Halpin draft, but at this point, I'm going with Smith. He's right at this point, he is the more or the major league adjacent prospect for me right now.
You're gonna have people coming at you, and you'll mention.
Well, they will. So I do agree with you. I think Smith probably gets taken in the draft. So I guess I'm agreeing with you that he is a must add because I don't want to lose him in the draft either. I don't know. He's a pro. Like I have Espino as obviously like slam dunk 100%. And I think Smith is like 90%, which is there really a difference? I don't know. I think he's getting added, and he should, because at the very least he's interesting, and you need more guys to ride the I-71 shuttle next year in the bullpen before you consider adding like Franco Alamán and if Andrew Walters forces the issue. But he is a major league relief prospect. Yeah. Yeah.
I think he could be, listen, he's probably, in my opinion, the 3rd best relief prospect in the minors. And they've got some really interesting ones, but I think he could help this team.
Yeah, he would. And I think he will help this team as soon as next year. I do think he will help this team. He's got to work on some control issues. That's about it. The other names we probably should throw out there pitching wise before we move on to the position players, because we do have one we'll probably debate. I mean, so there's Nick Mikolajczyk and Andrew Misiaszek, guys who were both very close to being 40-man ads last year or 2 years ago. Both have been hurt. And those are guys that other teams could take advantage of in the draft by ILing them when they get there and playing service or playing those roster manipulation games. Because Mikolajczyk was essentially, kind of Cade Smith 2 years ago. He had a great year.
Even better, I would say. I mean,
he was even better. He was their best relief prospect.
You go back 2 years ago, and he was a no doubt he's going to get added to the 40-man. He's that good. And then he just kind of came unglued last year. Well, he didn't pitch well last year.
He was hurt last year. He had Tommy John. He didn't pitch.
Wasn't the Tommy John like in the off season?
No, he didn't pitch last year.
Okay, so the year before that he had one bad year, and then he had the injury. And
correct. So him and Misiaszek both had elbow surgeries. They both didn't pitch last season after spring training. So other teams could take advantage of that. The only thing I could see is if Cleveland is looking at them while they're rehabbing and working down in Arizona, if they see something in their rehab and the recovery that they really like, they could add them, but I don't see it being likely. The other name is Ethan Hankins. I know people are going to bring up Ethan Hankins, former first-round pick. He was actually eligible last year for the Rule 5 draft and went unselected, and that's because he didn't pitch in 2020 like nobody did. in the minors. He didn't pitch in 2021 because of Tommy John. He didn't pitch in 2022 because of Tommy John. And he threw some good innings this year. But the thing is, look, he missed 3 whole years basically of development. He hasn't been above high A yet. I'm not saying the stuff isn't still there. Like, you can see flashes of it. He just needs reps. But that makes it very hard for a team to select him in the Rule 5 draft, knowing he needs reps to develop, because you're not going to get that in the bullpen. Yeah, you could hide him for 90 days and set him down and see what happens. But if you hide him for 90 days somehow in the bullpen when he's not getting reps, you're wasting more time in his career, because he's going to be 24 next year. He's already missed 3 years. So what are you really doing with him if you're hiding him and putting him back in the minors? You're wasting more time, and you're just hoping by age 25 he's valuable to you. Who knows what's going to happen in 2 years? So I think it's very unlikely he gets selected in the major league portion. I'm not going to get in the minor league portion because we're just confused a bunch of people listening about that, but we could explain it eventually.
I don't even know if I can explain it fully, if I was being honest.
I can a little, but it's very vague. It's
vague.
Intentionally. It's intentionally
okay.
Vague.
The big name with hitters is Jonathan Rodriguez. I think he ended up winning the Triple Crown for the Guardians minor league production.
He did
a lot of things across the board. 2 good years. This is a guy who was one of the youngest players in his draft class, was a 17-year-old when he drafted. It's taken him a while. There are some big red flags in his production. He does have a lot of similarities with Oscar Gonzalez. I am all for protecting him. If it comes down to needing to open a spot, then I think the ceiling is higher for him than with Oscar. So I'm moving on in that regard, which is now going to get me comments in my Twitter feed.
Can't imagine where.
But for me, he is the third guy, and I would strongly consider adding him. I mean, also, let's be honest. Like, I have no problems letting go of Cam Gallagher to open a spot and 99 to open a spot. To me, those are 2 guys I would cut right away and bring those 2 in, and then you could still hold on to Oscar if you wanted to give him another offseason. I would do that, honestly, before I let go of Oscar. But he is him, and personally for me, I have to add 4 because I think Diane Frias is someone that has a chance to get selected just because he could play anywhere. He's a plus defender, and there are a lot of people who are big time fans of his.
I agree with you on that. Oscar and Rodriguez are redundant. So if you add Rodriguez, there's no point in keeping Oscar. You don't need both. And if Rodriguez is in the exact same situation that Gonzalez was in a couple of years ago, right? Gonzalez, if they didn't add him, was going to become a minor league free agent, and they didn't add him, which I didn't think they were going to add him. And instead, they re-signed him to a minor league deal and an invite to spring training, which means all 29 teams out there could have had Oscar Gonzalez if they would have just offered him a major league contract. They didn't. And Rodriguez is the same thing. He'll be a minor league free agent at the end of the year, or when the World Series is over, if Cleveland doesn't add him to the 40-man roster. They could easily just offer him a contract and invite him to spring training the next year, the way they did with Rodriguez. I'm fine with adding him because you might as well see if he can be a solution to right field. It's on some level, unless you upgrade. Like, unless you find a more permanent competent / hopeful solution in right field, I'm all for adding him, because you could even add him now and then over the offseason acquire a right fielder or make a decision on somebody else in right field and say, okay, we don't need Rodriguez anymore. We can do whatever with him at this point. I'm fine with doing that just to be safe at this point, to give yourself the option. I don't know if, like I said, but having him, you're right, having him both Oscar is redundant. The Frias thing, I'm on the fence about, because he hasn't played above high A. It's so unlike position players to get selected at below double A. Like, you just don't see it that often. It's hard for them to stick. I know he can play the infield. I don't think he can play shortstop, though. Here's the thing. He plays a good third base. He plays a good second. He didn't play a lot of shortstop this year. I don't know if that was by design, if that's because they had other guys they felt could play short, but he didn't play a lot of short. And I don't know if he can play short. I think if you're taking him in the Rule 5 draft, you have to be confident he can, because you can't hide a guy like that on your bench for 90 days if he can't cover short. If he can only cover second and third, you can't hide a guy like that. And we don't know if the walk rate's going to translate, because they're so hard to tell. I'm not confident it can right now because he hasn't faced AA pitching. I like the pop from the left side. There's things I like about Frias. I'm not saying I don't like him. I just don't think there's a big enough risk there for me to worry about it. So I'm not protecting him, especially not when your 40-man roster is just loaded with other infielders. So it's the same thing as Gonzalez. If you're going to add Dayan Frias, you have to remove one of your infielders, whether that's Freeman or Martinez or Rocchio or Tena. You have to move them somewhere if you want to make room for Frias. You cannot protect all of them.
And then Lavastida is someone else. If they don't add him, he'll hit free agency. And personally, I would strongly consider adding him as well. He had a nice bounce back year. And I think, his athleticism is kind of rare for that position. And I would much rather have him than Cam Gallagher.
Well, that's a no-brainer. I'd rather have you catching than Cam Gallagher, Jeff.
No, you wouldn't.
Okay,
No,
I'd rather have you hitting than Cam Gallagher. Maybe not catching, but hitting.
You wouldn't.
I would.
No.
I'm kidding.
I mean, I can maybe lean in and try to take some, but that's
the thing about Lavastida for me is David Fry and Bo Naylor are going to be the only catchers on your roster going into the winter, and David Fry really works best when he is allowed to play first or whatever else, and he's the emergency catcher because then he gives you more utility. So yes, they do need a third catcher on the 40-man roster. That could be Lavastida. I'm not against that. Real quickly before we get out of here, here's some other names to at least remember. Jose Devers is a name to remember. Juan Ben-Min is a name to remember. Wilfredo Antunez is a name to remember. We can discuss all these guys tomorrow if there is an interest in that, and if not, we can move on.
Yeah, there's some guys to debate. Make sure you comment below and let us know who you would like us to talk about. If there's someone you've not talked about or someone you'd like more time on, we appreciate all of you. Remember to do your part, be an everydayer, and go Guardians, go.